The first time Jonah saw the faceless grin, he thought it was a trick of the light. It was late, past midnight, when he glanced up from his laptop and saw it reflected in the darkened screen. A wide, gaping smile stretched across a smooth, featureless face, hovering just behind him. He spun around, heart slamming against his ribs, but there was nothing there, just the quiet hum of his apartment, the shadows pooling in the corners. But when he looked back at the screen, the grin remained, closer this time, and it was watching him. At first, he told himself it was exhaustion. He hadn't been sleeping well, plagued by strange dreams he could never quite remember upon waking. But the grin lingered, appearing in places it shouldn't. The glare of a television left on too long, the glass of a storefront window as he passed by, the reflection of his own eyes in the bathroom mirror, except they weren't his. They belonged to something else, something that smiled too wide. Jonah stopped looking into mirrors after that, but avoidance didn't stop the grin from finding him. It was in the gleam of his phone screen when it dimmed, in the black void of his bedroom at night. He could feel it watching, feel its presence just outside his vision. His apartment grew cold, the kind of cold that settled deep into his bones, that made his breath mist even when the heat was turned up. And always, he felt the pull, the compulsion to look, to acknowledge it. One night as he lay in bed, the air in his room thick with silence, something shifted in the darkness. Not the usual creak of the old building settling, not the distant sounds of the city outside, but a whisper of movement, slow, deliberate. He clenched his eyes shut, refusing to give in. But then he felt it, a breath, warm and wet, right against his ear. "Look at me," it whispered. Jonah didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He lay frozen until the sun rose, until the light drove the shadows back. But even then, he felt it watching. The grin, it had never spoken before. And now, it wanted more. The following days passed in a haze of fear. Jonah barely left his apartment, terrified that if he turned a corner too quickly, he would come face to face with the thing that had been haunting him. He stopped using his phone, stopped looking at screens altogether. But it wasn't enough. One evening, as he sat in his kitchen, forcing himself to eat, the room grew still. The air thickened, pressing in on him like unseen hands. And then, slowly, the shadows stretched. The walls darkened. He didn't want to look. He knew he shouldn't. But his body disobeyed, his gaze drawn to the reflection in the window. The grin was there. Not just a trick of the light this time. It was real. And this time, it wasn't just smiling. It was opening its mouth. Jonah's breath hitched as the darkness inside that gaping grin pulsed, shifting like something alive. A pit of blackness, deeper than the night, swallowing the faint light of the room. And then, it moved. The reflection stepped forward. He stumbled back, crashing into the table, sending his plate clattering to the floor. His heartbeat roared in his ears. The reflection had left the glass. It was in the room with him. He didn't see it move, but he felt it. The pressure of its presence, the overwhelming wrongness of it. And then, the whisper came again, closer, beneath his skin. "Let me in." The walls warped. The lights flickered. And suddenly, Jonah understood. This thing wasn't just haunting him. It wanted to become him. It had been waiting, watching, learning, and now it was ready. He ran, bolted from the apartment into the night, gasping for air. But no matter how far he went, the grin followed. In the eyes of passing strangers, in the reflections of puddles on the street, in the glint of headlights speeding by. It was everywhere. It was inside him. Jonah didn't return home. He couldn't. Instead, he found himself in a motel, staring at the blank television screen, knowing what he would see if he dared to look. The grin was patient. It had time. And now, so did he. He lasted 3 days. 3 days of avoiding his own reflection, of feeling the weight of the faceless grin pressing down on him. But exhaustion won. His body ached, his mind frayed at the edges. On the 4th night, as he sat in the darkness, he made a mistake. His phone screen flickered on. A notification. Instinct took over. His eyes darted to the glow. And there it was, the grin. But this time, it wasn't behind him. It wasn't a reflection. It was his own face. Jonah screamed, clawed at his skin, desperate to rip the grin away. But it was too late. His mouth was stretched too wide, his features smooth and empty. The laughter came next. Not his own, but something else, spilling from his throat in a voice he didn't recognize. The world blurred, his vision tunneled. And then, silence. When Jonah opened his eyes, the room was empty. The motel was quiet. He turned toward the mirror, expecting the nightmare to still be there. But his face was normal, his features in place. As he walked outside, passing strangers on the street, he saw it, reflected in their eyes, a wide, gaping grin, watching, waiting, and deep inside him, something else smiled. The first time Oliver noticed it, he was just a boy, lying awake in the dark while the house settled around him. The old walls creaked and groaned, stretching their bones in the quiet of the night. But there was another sound beneath the settling, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming against hollow wood. He held his breath, staring at the ceiling, willing himself to ignore it. But then he heard something worse, a whisper, so close it brushed his ear. "I see you." Oliver never told his parents. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, a trick of childhood fear. But the tapping never stopped. At first, it was only at night, soft and distant. But as he grew older, it became more insistent. Sometimes it followed him from room to room. Sometimes it came from inside the walls, beside his bed, directly behind his headboard. And sometimes, on the worst nights, it came from inside the closet, accompanied by the sound of something breathing. Years passed, and Oliver moved away, leaving the house and its whispers behind. But the silence never lasted. The tapping returned in his college dorm, in his first apartment, in the home he shared with his wife. No matter where he went, the sound followed, and the whisper grew bolder. "I see you," it would murmur from the dark corners, from the air vents, from the empty spaces behind furniture. His wife never heard it. She would laugh softly, squeezing his hand when he woke up trembling in the night. "Bad dreams," she said. "Too much stress." But Oliver knew better. He saw the way their dog refused to go near certain walls, the way the air sometimes grew too still, too heavy, and worst of all, the way his own reflection seemed to lag a second behind in the mirror, his mouth still moving after he'd stopped speaking. Then the messages changed. The whisper wasn't content with just watching anymore. "Let me in," it began to plead, its voice twisting into something more human, something desperate. "Let me in, Oliver. Let me in." One night, after too many sleepless hours, he made a mistake. He answered, "What do you want?" His voice was hoarse, barely more than a breath. The tapping stopped. The silence stretched so deep it swallowed the world, and then a scraping, like nails raking across wood. "You." Oliver didn't sleep that night, or the next. The whisper grew louder, its presence more oppressive. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Objects shifted when he wasn't looking. The walls seemed thinner, almost as if they were breathing. His wife noticed his exhaustion. She suggested therapy, medication, anything to help. But he couldn't explain it to her, not in a way that made sense. Because how could he tell her the truth? That something was waiting for him in the walls. That it had been waiting his entire life. One evening, as he sat alone in their living room, the lights flickered and the television screen filled with static. A face emerged from the shifting noise, featureless, hollow, but with two deep, endless pits where its eyes should be. And then, through the distorted crackle, the whisper came again. "I see you, Oliver, and I am so hungry." The walls trembled. The floorboards beneath his feet groaned. And he understood, finally, what it had been waiting for. He had acknowledged it, and now it was coming. His wife found him the next morning, curled in the corner of their bedroom, mumbling to himself, eyes wide and unblinking. He couldn't tell her what had happened in the night, what he had seen seeping from the cracks in the walls, stretching toward him with grasping, formless fingers. He couldn't explain how he had felt it press against him, wrapping around him like a second skin, whispering in a voice that was almost his own. She took him away, to a hotel, a new apartment, somewhere the thing couldn't reach. But it didn't matter. Wherever he went, the walls were there, and wherever there were walls, it could watch. The tapping started again on the first night in their new place, soft, insidious, just beneath the drywall. His wife slept peacefully beside him, unaware. But Oliver lay awake, his breath shallow, his pulse frantic. He knew better now. It had always been watching, and it always would be.